appropriate treatment, appropriate treatment that reduces death and suffering from the disease. Mortality rates for people diagnosed with breast, lung, and colorectal cancer have been reduced in expansion states compared to non-expansion states. Furthermore, Medicaid expansion was tied to improving screening rates for colorectal, prostate, and cervical cancer. As you know, being diagnosed at an early stage gives a patient on average a better outcome and will cost less than later diagnosis. Access to affordable insurance, such as Medicaid, is critical for these patients. Okay, goal 2. Next slide. Thank you. The second goal focuses on tobacco use and policy. It directs attention to the need for increasing taxes on cigarettes and consistently taxing tobacco products. It highlights the need for restricting youth access to tobacco, to cigarettes, other tobacco products, and e-cigarettes, and calls for strengthening clean air protections to include e-cigarettes. Each of these items were included in the governor's proposed budget, raising the purchase age to 21 years, increases taxes on brown cigarettes and e-cigarettes, and expanding the clean air policies to include e-cigarettes. This goal really comes from evidence that demonstrates that increasing the price of tobacco products is a sufficient and significant deterrent for purchasing by youth. Goal 3. The third goal is to increase access to cancer prevention vaccination services. This includes hepatitis B and the HPV vaccine. The agenda highlights the need for insurance coverage for vaccine, and it supports the Vaccines for Children program, which is a federal program, and for coordinating vaccines for babies and mothers under the WIC program. Okay, go for it. The fourth goal is to reduce barriers to cancer screening and increase insurance coverage for diagnostic testing. This first bullet, keep decision makers informed on the current recommendations for screenings. Well, you may know that the United States Preventive Services Task Force is considering reducing the recommended age for colonoscopies from 50 years to 45 years of age. If the USPSTF adopts this recommendation, we'll be closely watching for any action by the Wisconsin Commissioner of Insurance or legislature, and we'll certainly keep you informed should you wish to be engaged in that dialogue. Next slide. Okay. Goal 5 is reduce cancer costs by patients and families. As you know, cancer is a major financial burden for patients and their families. And we've just released our financial toxicity issue brief about the burden. The issue brief was included in our mailing to the members of the Wisconsin State Legislature and the governor with additional information on cancer control and prevention in the state. The issue brief is also on our website under the resources tabs and issue briefs. I believe it's the first one that pops up because it's brand new. Goal 6. The final goal is to ensure access to quality palliative care. This calls for the establishment of a palliative care advisory council in the state. This has been introduced in previous legislative sessions. It hasn't been introduced yet this session, but we'll be watching for it and, of course, keep you informed on what happens with that. It also calls for increasing insurance coverage for palliative care, conversations with medical professionals and associated services. Currently, palliative care is covered under most insurance plans, but that's covered under varying degrees, basically, varying coverage. All right, the next step for the policy agenda, this is a resource for you and all members of the collaborative as you work on cancer prevention and control, both in your work role and then also as citizens of Wisconsin. The collaborative will incorporate the goals of the policy agenda into our news sources, which primarily are the Policy Review, which is a quarterly publication, and the monthly Engage that's produced. This will allow you to track the developments of the bills and how they relate to the policy agenda. Okay, go ahead in the next slide, Beth. Thank you. We want to make sure that these resources are relevant and helpful to you as you follow various policies in the state, bills, budgets, that sort of thing. So I have a poll for you that tries to get to the heart of that and helps us develop these policy resources. Can we launch the poll? Okay. So which types of materials from the Wisconsin Cancer Collaborative would you consider most helpful to learn about cancer policy issues? So this is for perspective of learning. First, issue briefs on specific issues facing cancer survivors. Second, Cancer County profiles that provide stats on cancer prevalence in Wisconsin counties. C, infographics that illustrate the burden of cancer. D, the Wisconsin Cancer Plan. E, the Policy Review, which, like I said, is the quarterly publication that explains policies to the members. Or F, and what I'm going to have you do is, instead of answering F now, there is a second question that we can get more at the dynamic. So if you want to press F and then share comments, we'll do that in a second. And go ahead and select your answers. Okay. Looks like 2/3 for everything. Thank you. I'll write that down. Okay. Oh, it's still moving. I'll sit tight. Okay, let's close that. All right, next question. Are there other types of materials that could provide more education on an issue or topic? If there are, why don't you place your answer in the chat box? And Beth wrote, if you have ideas for additional materials that would be helpful, go ahead and enter in the chat box. Okay, I'll move on to the third question. Which resources would you find most helpful when communicating with policymakers? Issue briefs, Cancer County profiles, infographics illustrate the burden of cancer, Wisconsin Cancer Plan, or other, and share in the box what others would be. So that's the third question. Okay. Next question. Do you believe that you're informed on the need for comprehensive insurance coverage to cancer survivors during and post-treatment? And if you answered more materials would be helpful, go ahead and enter that in the chat box. Okay, I'll go on to the fifth question. Do you believe you're informed on the financial burden of cancer on patients and families, on toxicity? Yes or no, more materials would be helpful. And any suggestions for more materials? We have our new issue brief that came out. So hopefully that would be a helpful resource that goes into the scope of financial toxicity in Wisconsin, and then how policy impacts it, and policy implications, suggestions, and community suggestions as well. Okay. 6, do you believe you're informed on the need for, oh, thank you, Alexandra. There's the links to the financial toxicity of cancer issue brief. Do you believe you're informed on the need for quality palliative care for cancer survivors? Yes or no, more materials would be helpful. And then if you have ideas on more materials, please let me know. Okay. Final question. Do you believe you are informed on the connection between alcohol use and its relation to cancer? Yes, or more materials would be helpful. And any suggestions on the materials? Okay, I'll close out the poll. Thank you. Can you all see the results of the poll? I'll just scroll through it real quick. I'm a policy type, so polls sometimes are helpful, but then I went to law school and we don't like numbers. So I thank you for doing this. We've got experts on the team that are really good with numbers and work on this. So I appreciate your help. Okay. Any questions that you might have for me about the budget or the policy agenda? The budget is pretty vast. I mean, it's got a lot of provisions. So I might not have all the answers to everything, but if if I don't have the answer, I ask that you put your name in the chat box and email address, and I can get back to you.
So Amy, this is Kurt.
Yes.
I have a quick question for you, and I know that we've talked about this before, but I know this is a moving target, but where do you see the governor's budget right now, and what's likely to survive the Joint Finance Committee, particularly in terms of Medicaid expansion? You know, I know that Speaker Voss has, said that's kind of a non-starter, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But that there might be some and some movement on that front, particularly given the federal government's match.
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain where we might be at this point in time, if you can read the tea leaves?
I will try. The budget overall, when it first was released, Speaker Voss of the Assembly and the chairs of the Joint Finance Committee, there's a chair for the Assembly and a chair for the Senate, dismissed it, saying that they'll have to start from scratch. But what's happened is the new money that came from the federal government has changed the conversation a bit. Speaker Voss remains pretty adamant that Medicaid expansion isn't going anywhere, but the Senate leadership and committee chair have not. There's been a little bit of radio silence, which advocates are interpreting as there's interest in discussion as opposed to complete opposition. So it's not dead. There, and the Senate chair actually said that it will be part of the conversation. So if, without it's kind of like, if not now, when? I mean, passing up $1 billion is significant. So we'll see, but I would say it's still in flux.
And one other question, completely unrelated, more to the point of palliative care and the initiatives from the policy committee. Do we see that as a standalone bill? Because didn't we see that as a standalone bill in the past?
Yes, that the Palliative Care Advisory Council is a standalone bill. So it was not included in the governor's budget. So it would be a standalone bill.
And is that a bill that's currently active, or did that sort of die in committee someplace and we're waiting that to get revamped, if you will?
It died in committee last year during the last legislative session. We have a new legislative session, so we're waiting to see who would introduce it. So there's no reason why it wouldn't be introduced, but we just haven't seen the bill draft put forward yet.
Okay. Can you explain just to me just a little bit, not to belabor this, but explain to me a little bit. So if a bill dies in committee during that legislative session, and there's incentive or desire to bring it forward again, does it start all over again? Do you go back and say, okay, we need to get new sponsors, brand new bill, put a new name on it, or do you just copy paste and move forward?
You copy paste, but you do have to reintroduce it, and it does have to have the whole process of being referred to a committee and then the committee consideration. So the process has to renew, but the bill text can be simply revived.
Okay. And do we know if that bill is going to get revived, or do we know where that stands?
We do not. We suspect it will, but we don't have confirmation of when or if for a fact.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
Amy, this is Beth. A quick, just a reminder, how, if you're a member of the Wisconsin Cancer Collaborative and you're kind of learning about these policy issues, what could I do? What can people do as a member? You know, what could they say of taking this policy agenda? Maybe just a reminder on like quick bullets on what would be some actions they could take to either move it forward in their own organization or, you know, personally, what are things that they could do?
Well, let's take one would be the tobacco provisions, for example. One, they would learn about what the tobacco provisions are in the governor's budget, and we can provide resources on that. And then second, they can contact their legislative officials. On the Wisconsin government website, when you go into the legislature's website, there is a little box that says find my elected officials, and you can see who your members are that you can write to. And as a constituent, you know, you do not need to know the exact weeds of the bill. You have a perspective on it and can say, you know, that you would support increasing the tax, or you would support increasing the age, and communicate that with them. And messages from constituents resonate.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Beth.
Do you think there's also an opportunity that people, since our policy agenda is kind of online, that I know we've had other steering committee members ask, is this something you can forward on to within their own organizations, or you know, just for people to consider and say, these are important issues to the Wisconsin Cancer Collaborative, you know, that they have ties to impacting the cancer burden in the state. Maybe there are issues we should learn more about or know more about. Would that be an opportunity? Could people do that as well?
Yes, people can share that with other like colleagues and so forth. It's not an advocacy agenda, so it wouldn't go too directly to the legislature. You wouldn't forward it to them because it's not for purposes of lobbying, but it's an educational document, and it makes that connection between why is a particular issue important to cancer prevention and control.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts or questions from participants today? And also, I do want to give a shout out and thank you to Dr. Edel for his questions and engagement. Dr. Edel is the chair of the policy committee, so we were excited to have him on and kind of sharing his insights and asking those probing questions that I'm sure many participants are sitting there wondering and thinking as they listen to the cancer-related policy items.
I appreciate it, Beth. Thank you. Just remember, I'm getting more than I'm giving right now. This is very informative.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Yeah, Dr. Edel just joined on as the policy chair in 2021. So it's exciting to have somebody that's really on the front lines of cancer care, getting so involved and integrated into policy issues, because it speaks a lot, not only to Dr. Edel, but just the passion of the collaborative and the policy committee.
There's much work to be done.
Well, if there aren't any questions, and if there is something that pops up later, we are always here as a resource. Amy is here as a resource. I know that she shared her contact information, but you can definitely reach out at any time if questions pop up and you want to know a little bit more, even as the budget goes on, right? Because there's, as Amy explained, there's many steps still left in our budget process in the state this year. And how that relates to our cancer issues is always kind of top of mind for our collaborative members. So always reach out to Amy and stay tuned into our newsletters and any additional policy reviews that come out this year. So we do have one final poll just at the end. And this is more just webinar related, that we love your feedback, as these webinars are meant for our members and others in the state of Wisconsin that are focusing on reducing the cancer burden. We want to make sure we're meeting the needs. And if there are other opportunities that we could do more or provide additional information, we really would love to know that. So if you could take just a few seconds to fill out the poll and give us some feedback. And while the poll is being completed, I want to make sure we don't lose people. We just have one more reminder I want to provide people, is that we will also have our next networking webinar. So please stay tuned. On May 13th, we will be talking about UV radiation and skin cancer. So as we're all getting back outside and so excited for the warm weather, it's also a really great reminder of what we can do to just keep our skin safe and reduce our risk of skin cancer. So we kind of have an exciting webinar on the latest in UV radiation and skin cancer. But we're also going to talk with community, that's what are some things that you can do locally to help your community stay safe as well. So registration link, again, on our website. We would love to have you. It'll be an email going out to our members. If you are, again, currently not a member, please feel free to join. We would love to have you. So it looks like we might be complete on the polling. So then I will just close by saying thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. That was an absolutely wonderful webinar. I learned so much from you every time. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your time with us today. Thank you to everybody else for joining. We were really glad to have you on. We hope to see you again in May.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Amy, just let me know when you're all set for me to close. You're on mute.
Well, this would be the time for me to be on mute as opposed to the other. Do I need to do anything with evaluation?
Nope.
Okay. I can just close.